I was just sitting with just about to press record on on this video, and I was guided to, as I often do, to pause for a moment and breathe through my heart space. And as I do this, what this does is it connects us into our divinity, so our divine truth that exists within. And as I started to do this, it humored me, as it does, because everything segues so perfectly. And it was coming into my awareness that when I started doing this, that this is almost the first port of call for a recommendation for Lisa's question. So Lisa asked a beautiful question, and I'll just summarize that when there's so much discordance around us at times, when is it our time to stand up and advocate? And when is it our time to allow things to be as they are? And so if you're listening to this transmission, I guess you are, if you've got it on right now, I recommend you take a moment and breathe through your beautiful heart space and connect in with your inner beingness. If you've been journeying for a while with us, you know that over time, the connection into the greater reality through connection to our higher self beings becomes easier with practice. So the more that we bring ourselves to connect in with it, the less that it takes to be able to connect in with it, which, makes sense. It's like anything that, practice makes everything easier. And so when I'm reflecting on this question, the first thing that came forward for me, but I also realized that this is me personally, because my mission is not to function within the old world. My personal mission, and potentially for many of you as well, particularly if you resonate with the frequency of my transmissions and are along for the ride, that you would be the same, that our role is to stabilize a higher reality. And that doesn't mean everyone's job is to stabilize the higher reality. There are some people who are here from higher light, coded to advocate within the darkness. But that doesn't mean it's all of our role to do that, because what happens if we're here to stabilize light and we are expending our energy in the dark, then we are not necessarily fulfilling our mission. And so that's a very personal question to ask what your role is. And so if you take a moment and feel into that, like when you feel into advocating within the darkness, does that light you up? If it causes you trauma and causes your energy to shut down, then I would suggest that that's potentially not your mission. Because those who are here coded to advocate for light in the darkness, that lights them up. That gets them going. That brings all of their energy to fight the darkness. And if that's not you, then that doesn't have to be you. The guilt of what might be a 3D construct of feeling like you need to advocate for the less fortunate, does that mean that you take yourself to the level of what is causing the misfortune? Or do you allow yourself to rise above and advocate by setting an example of a higher frequency reality? And I know that that's my mission to do that, is to advocate for a higher frequency reality. And I have been asked in the past, what I think about this drama and that drama and this drama and that drama. And not coming from a place of ignorance is I really don't know about those dramas. Because what happens is when I plug into them, I can feel my energy shrink and my energy dwindle. And from that place of dwindled energy, I'm not able to function in a way that I do, supporting, stabilizing a higher frequency reality. And so I'll leave that question, with each of you individually. Does it light your soul on fire to advocate in the darkness? And if the answer is yes, yes, do it. We certainly need people advocating in the darkness, but we don't need all of us connecting back in with the darkness, because remembering as well that each time we put our attention anywhere, we're giving it more power. And so if all of us, just diverting for a second there, they were just showing me the media. The media is a classic at keeping people stuck in the milieu, keeping people stuck in the drama, keeping people stuck in the problem by bombarding people constantly with just the bad news. There's actually a subset of our population that believes that that's all that happens in the world is bad stuff. That is so manipulative that I don't even want to participate. I do not own a television for this very reason, because I can see straight through it. They're manipulating the collective who is still connected into that unawareness, the people who are not awakening and may never awaken, and that's okay. And this is another aspect that came forward when um, I was reading Lisa's question, and it's about, I just lost it then. I just lost the thread. I'm like, oh, where'd that thread go? The other part of the what came forward is about, just give me a moment. Okay, back on it. All right. So, that the other part that came forward and that often comes up with the guides as well is, and it's been coming up a bit lately, is about the timeline split. And I'm sure that you have heard of the timeline split. And, you know, the more that those of us are healing, the more obvious becomes the unhealed. And, it can cause us great pain, especially when the unhealed are those that we love. The problem is that because we are all sovereign beings, that it takes each one of us, when we're ready, if we're ever ready, to wake up and allow ourselves to let go of faulty programs, to let go of things that aren't serving us, to allow ourselves to start to expand our minds to access a bigger picture, to open to the greater reality that there is always suffering and there's always the opposite of that as well. And it depends where we put our focus. And part of what's going to become more and more obvious, especially in the times coming with the big shifts that are happening at the moment and under acceleration, which you've probably all noticed as well, is that part of the higher dimensional reality is non-judgment. And so when people are stuck in their suffering, can we allow it to be so? Can we allow whatever is happening around us that isn't us, can we allow it to be exactly as it is? Sometimes, and you might have experienced this on your own journey, that to create a big shift or a big leap in evolution, sometimes prob problems, I don't like to use the word problems because that's being judgmental as well, because even though it can seem like problems at the time, they're not actually problems when they're doing you a favor in the bigger picture. So, you know, sometimes things have to shake us off a stuck path that isn't our highest timeline to redirect us onto our higher timeline. Now, I'm sure you've all had experiences like that before, if not a few, where you can be going along merrily, just kind of in repetition and habitual type of, yeah, not really excited about anything because it gets a bit boring, really, doing all the mundane. And then all of a sudden something will happen and it'll seem like really bad and terrible that, this happened. But what it does is it's actually rerouting. And then we find out later that that was actually lucky that that happened. Who's had that experience before? Lucky that happened to allow another door to open as one door closes. And so, as we might in the immediacy judge a particular thing that's happening, do we know what's happening in the greater reality? As the person may need to walk into that brick wall for them to see the light. So, this softening into trusting even more really lessens worry. And this is something that I wanted to share as well about my recent experience, in Peru. But we'll see if we have enough time with this transmission. Otherwise, I'll share a little bit more on the next. But yeah, another remarkable experience. Anyone who's ever been on a soul journey and that depth of introspection knows that, there's big awarenesses that come through the other side as we allow it to be so. But yeah, so considering that, when we are stuck in the middle of discord, are we in a position to judge what's actually happening? Do people need to experience a certain level of suffering to create change? Even to advocate, it's a calling. First and foremost, what came through at the beginning there, that being a specific mission, so to speak, to advocate at those levels. Outside of that, when people feel threatened, they don't think clearly. And I'm sure you would have heard that in some of my teachings before, that when there's a stress response, there's a disconnection to higher order thinking. And so as soon as somebody is in a stress trying to defend something, they're not going to be able to access reasonable consciousness. And that's also something to be aware of. So are you advocating to something that cannot hear you? Something that is not capable, somebody who is capable in that moment of accessing higher order thinking. And, that's just physiology. That's not being insulting to anybody's limited intelligence. That is actual physiology. When we're in a stress response, we get a disconnection to the prefrontal cortex, which means we cannot think clearly. We cannot do socialization behavior. We cannot recognize consequences for action. These are all facets. We cannot problem solve. These are all facets of the prefrontal cortex. When we are in a stress response, this part of our brain disconnects. We go into survival which means looking for danger, which means we become paranoid to stay alive. Now, if you just consider that for a moment, that in these heated political or religious environments, is it possible to create change anyway at that level of discord? And so just breathing into that. So there's a lot of different aspects to consider in that way, without needing to make yourself feel guilty and feeling like you need to do something, because is it even possible in a lot of those circumstances to even do anything given physiology? For one, first and foremost, given physiology, but then also if it's not your core programming. If you're not here as a warrior to advocate in the darkness for light, then it's not going to light you up. And if it's not going to light you up, it's going to burn you out. And if you burn out, then you're no good to anybody. You're no good to yourself, and you're no good to anybody around you, and no good to your true heart's mission. And so just breathing into that. And, I love what Angela added. Let me just get it up. What Angela added on her comment to that as well, because I'm sure all of us reflective beings do contemplate, these things. And I welcome, these are open discussions. I really welcome anybody to, share anything, share any of your insights as well and experiences. I always love to have the floor open in that way. Yeah, 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 I love that. And, particularly being sensitive. Yes, and we are sensitive beings, particularly as, healers, in that way, because, that's what we've come for as well, to be able to allow ourselves to feel and navigate our way in the world. Yeah, coming back to faith. That's it. And right at the beginning when I offered to, come back into the heart space and connect with that, do a heart breath for a couple of minutes and then revisit what you were contemplating with uncertainty and view it through that higher frequency lens. That higher frequency lens is seeing through your higher self beingness, and your higher self beingness is already plugged into the greater reality and can see so much more than we can in our limited, and especially when we're stressed, human selves in that way. I'll just keep reading it. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, and I love that. And then your reflection again there, Lisa, being what I want to see in the world. Yes, that was Gandhi's message. Be the change that we wish to see. That doesn't mean barking our opinions with the rest of the stressed out crew. It's like we become the frequency that stabilizes a high dimensional reality. And that's what it's about. That's the trajectory that we're on. So many of us are awakening and we're doing these wee connecting with the higher frequency reality and then back in the milieu. And it's like, how do we start to stabilize this more and more? Is by untangling. It doesn't mean ignoring what's happening, it means recognizing it for what it is. It is discord. It is dense, stressed out, disconnected survival mode discord, which is not even humaning. You cannot reason in that space. And so, you know, feeling into case by case in every moment, but bear in mind, bring yourself to this level of frequency and then connect in with your inner truth Feel what's right for you. If you've ever, been in connection with old wise people, they don't say much a lot of the time because they know they don't need to. They just sit and observe. And then, when asked for their wisdom, sprout their wisdom, not from an emotional aspect, but from that aspect of the observer, because they've just simply been observing and allowing things to be as they are. And this is one of the keys that's been continuing to deepen and unfold for me for years now. And it continues to deepen, but it's the same story, allowing things to be as they are. Can I trust enough in the universe, trust enough in the higher realms to allow things to be as they are, and trust the perfect unfoldment as it's required as well, as it's required energetically for us to evolve personally through our own discord takes steps. And if we don't take those steps inherently, we keep magnetizing experiences, discord, to try and move us into that evolution anyway. And so others outside of us could be going through that very thing. They could be on the precipice of another level of awakening. And it's not up to us. It's not our role to change anybody. It's only our job to do the work for ourselves. Gandhi, be the change we wish to see in the world. I love that, and thank you for bringing this conversation forward. It's so important, and particularly at this time with this timeline split becoming more and more palpable. All right, so we had one more little question here.